I took care of my grandma through her final years, bathed her, changed her, sat with her for hours when no one else would. At her funeral, my aunt walked up to the mic and said, she was always surrounded by family, especially her favorite daughter, my sister. I wasn't mentioned in the eulogy. After the service, they asked me to stay and clean up because, you're so good at the little things. That night, I found out they left me out of the will entirely. I'm Luke. I'm 38. I lived with my grandma, Margaret, in her little house in Lakeland, Florida, for the last 5 years of her life. She raised me after my mom died. My mom was her oldest daughter. My dad wasn't around, and I didn't have siblings. So when grandma started declining, I moved in. No one asked. I just did it. Because she was family. Because I loved her. She had diabetes, arthritis, memory issues, and eventually cancer. I gave up my apartment. Left my job. Started working odd hours doing remote work and handyman gigs just to stay afloat. I lived in her guest room. I paid the bills when her social security check didn't stretch far enough. I took her to every appointment, managed her meds, dealt with nurses and social workers, and eventually hospice. I changed her adult diapers. Cleaned her when she had accidents. I sat beside her when she cried from pain. I held her hand when she didn't recognize me anymore. My Aunt Denise, her other daughter, lived 15 minutes away in a gated community. She visited maybe twice a month. Sometimes with muffins. Sometimes with her daughter Heather. Always for photos. 3 generations of love, she posted once. I took that photo. Right before I cleaned up after grandma had diarrhea down her legs. The months before she passed were brutal. The seizures got worse. She stopped eating. She begged me not to leave her side. I didn't. She died just before sunrise. I was the one who found her. Not Denise. Not Heather. Me. I was the one who cleaned her up. Who called the hospice nurse. Who sat there and cried while they took her body out the front door in a bag. The funeral was held at a church she hadn't been to in 20 years, but Denise insisted. She said grandma would have wanted a proper Christian send-off. Whatever. I showed up early to help. I helped set up chairs, put up the easel with old photos, even handed out the programs. That's when I saw it. The obituary printed in the program listed her daughters, Rachel, my mom, deceased, and Denise. It listed Heather. It listed all 4 great-grandchildren. It didn't list me. Not even a mention. I thought maybe it was a misprint. I asked Denise about it before the service. She just smiled and said, we didn't want to complicate things. People wouldn't really know how to place you. I stared at her. I opened my mouth to say something, but nothing came out. The service started. People came up and spoke. A few cousins, an old neighbor. Then Denise went up to the mic. She had tears in her eyes. She sniffled like she was in a movie and said, my mother was always surrounded by love. Always surrounded by family. But she was especially close to her favorite daughter, my sister Rachel. They were inseparable. My jaw clenched so hard I thought I'd crack a tooth. Rachel, my mother, had been dead for almost 20 years. They hadn't spoken for 3 years before she died. But there she was, being honored like a saint, while I sat there with my stomach in knots, knowing I was the one who held grandma's hand when she couldn't even sit up anymore. When the service ended, people hugged me. Some said I looked like grandma. Some thanked me for all I'd done. But Denise? She hugged me and whispered in my ear, hey, sweetheart, would you mind staying behind to help clean up? You're so good at the little things. The little things. I nodded. I stayed. I threw out tissues soaked with strangers' tears. Picked up leftover coffee cups and sandwich crusts while they all went back to Heather's house to drink wine and celebrate life. That night, I drove back to Grandma's house. The house I had lived in, taken care of, kept running. The house she always said she was leaving to me. The porch light was on. There was a white envelope taped to the front door. It had my name on it, but not in her handwriting. Inside was a letter from a lawyer. Denise's lawyer. This letter serves as formal notice that the estate of Margaret Jean Fairchild has been fully transferred to her surviving daughter, Denise Whitlow, and her granddaughter Heather Whitlow. You are hereby requested to vacate the premises within 30 days. No mention of me. No inheritance. No thanks. No, in memory of. Just an eviction. I stared at that letter until my vision blurred. Then I went inside and sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. They took everything. They left me nothing. But they forgot something. They forgot who they were dealing with. Because I had everything they didn't. Proof. I had 5 years of proof. Journals. Medical bills I paid out of pocket. Photos of bruises, of medications, of every meal. I had audio recordings of Grandma telling me she wanted me to have the house. I had a video, dated 2 months before she died, of her saying it again on camera, clear as day. She looked straight into the lens and said, "Luke's the only one who's here for me. He's all I have. I want him to have the house. He earned it. Not Denise. Not Heather. Luke." That video lived on a flash drive I kept hidden in my sock drawer. Along with the receipts. And just like that, my grief turned to something else. I was done playing the good grandson. It was time they remembered who really did the little things. And what happens when you push someone who's done everything, and gets erased like they were nothing. I didn't sleep that night. I laid there, staring at the ceiling, holding that eviction letter in one hand and Grandma's old cross necklace in the other. It still smelled like her lotion. That soft lavender scent. The kind she used when her hands hurt too bad to open the pump bottle, so I'd rub it in for her. My chest was tight. It wasn't even about the money. It was about being erased. Like none of it happened. Like I wasn't the one who watched her take her last breath. So I started planning. First thing I did was copy everything. The journals. The bills. The video. I scanned it all. Uploaded it to 3 separate cloud drives. Printed out hard copies and kept them in a fireproof lockbox I'd bought the next morning. Then I drove to the lawyer's office listed on the letter. Small place. Strip mall. Guy named Jeffrey Klein. Mid-50s, slick hair, too much cologne. I walked in with a folder full of documents and asked to speak with him. His assistant told me he was busy. I told her it was urgent. She gave me attitude, but eventually he came out. We sat in a little glass-walled room. I laid the documents out like cards on a poker table. One by one. Bank statements. Signed checks. Photos of her bruises from when she fell and I patched her up. A printout of the video transcript. Jeffrey's smile faded by the 3rd page. I told him flat out, "I'm giving you the chance to fix this. You had a duty to make sure she was of sound mind when she signed that will. And I can prove she wasn't. I've got dates, recordings, medication lists. And witnesses." He cleared his throat and said, "Even if that's true, the will was notarized. It's legally binding." I said, "We'll see what a judge says. Or the court of public opinion." He leaned back, crossed his arms, and said, "Is that a threat?" I said, "No. It's a promise." I left, got in my truck, and drove to Heather's office. She worked at a fancy real estate firm in Tampa. I walked in during her lunch break, holding a folder. She was wearing this tight pencil skirt and talking loudly on the phone like she was closing some huge deal. She saw me and rolled her eyes. I didn't say a word. Just walked up to her desk, laid the folder down, and said, "You might want to read that before you keep spending Grandma's money." Then I left. Inside that folder, a full printout of the video transcript. Photos of Grandma's bruises. A copy of the eviction letter. And a sticky note that said, "You made a mistake." That was the beginning. I didn't stop there. I made a Facebook post. It wasn't dramatic. Just facts. A photo of me and Grandma from a year before she passed, me holding her hand in the hospital. Captioned, "I took care of my grandma for 5 years. Bathed her. Fed her. Stayed up through seizures. Held her as she died. I was left out of the will. Out of the funeral speech. Out of the obituary. Her daughter and granddaughter erased me and took everything. But I kept the receipts. Including a video where she says I should have had the house. If anyone wants the truth, ask." I posted it publicly. Tagged Heather. Tagged Denise. Then I turned off my phone. It exploded. By the next morning, I had 50 messages. Friends. Neighbors. Old coworkers. People I hadn't talked to in years. And the comments. Hundreds. Some defending me. Some shocked. Some tearing into Denise like vultures. Someone from the church even commented, "That's not the story we were told." Shame on them. Denise tried to fight back. She made her own post. Said I was mentally unstable, and that Grandma was confused in her final months and had been manipulated. That was the wrong move. Because the next thing I did was contact the hospice nurse, Lydia. Sweet woman, mid-40s, used to bring Grandma crossword books and jelly beans. I told her what was happening. She was furious. "Margaret talked about you every single day," she said. "She told me you were the only reason she kept going." Lydia wrote a sworn statement. Detailed everything. Her visits. Grandma's words. Her mental clarity. I got it notarized. Added it to my pile. Then I contacted a lawyer of my own. His name was Marcus Hale. Small office in Winter Haven. But sharp. He took one look at the documents and said, "You've got a strong case. Undue influence. Fraud. Maybe elder abuse." He filed a motion to challenge the will. Denise got served in person. At her house. On her birthday. Heather got served at work. In front of her coworkers. They didn't look so smug now. But here's where it twisted again. Denise didn't back down. She went on the attack. She sent me a cease and desist letter claiming defamation. Tried to have me removed from Grandma's Medicare records. She even contacted my job to accuse me of elder manipulation. I lost 2 clients. She wasn't just fighting. She was trying to ruin me. But what she didn't realize is, every time she struck, I got stronger. Because I was building something bigger. And I hadn't even played my final card yet. I thought things had already hit the worst point. But Denise was just getting started. After the cease and desist and the calls to my job, I figured she might back off once she saw I wasn't scared. Instead, she doubled down. One morning I woke up to a banging on the front door of Grandma's house. 3 loud, angry knocks. It was 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies. They handed me an official notice. Denise had filed for an emergency injunction, claimed I was squatting on the property and had become a threat to the estate. She attached photos from years ago, twisted out of context. One was of me fixing a broken shelf. She claimed it was unauthorized damage. Another showed Grandma sleeping in a chair, with me in the background. She implied I had recorded her without consent. She was trying to make me look like a predator. The deputies were polite but firm. "You'll need to vacate by the end of the week," one said. "We can't get involved in the civil dispute, but the order stands for now." I couldn't believe it. I had 7 days to get out of the only home I'd known for the past 5 years. I called Marcus right away. He was pissed. "She's trying to scare you," he said. "She wants to rattle you before we go to court. Don't let her. We'll get this overturned." But it wasn't just legal anymore. It was personal. The next day, I got a text from an unknown number. Just a photo. It was Grandma's jewelry box. The one she kept locked. The one she told me was, for my wedding gift, when that day ever comes. In the photo, Heather was wearing her pearls. The ones Grandma only wore on her anniversary every year, even after Grandpa died. Under the photo was one word, smile. That's when I knew. They weren't just erasing me. They were mocking me. I moved my things into a storage unit. Stayed in a cheap extended stay on the edge of town. While I packed, I found one more box I'd forgotten about. Stuffed under the bed. It was filled with letters. Dozens of them. Some written by Grandma to my mom. Some to me. Some never sent. Some dated as far back as the 90s. All in her shaky cursive, all filled with love. In one, she wrote, "Luke, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I hope they didn't shut you out. But if they did, please don't let them rewrite who you were to me. You were my light. My real sun. My gift." I sat on the floor for an hour, just holding those pages. Then I knew exactly what I had to do next. I reached out to a local reporter. Her name was Sharon Velasquez. She worked for the Lakeland Ledger. I'd seen her cover a local nursing home scandal the year before. She didn't pull punches. I told her I had a story: elder care, manipulation, a contested will, and the grandson who got pushed out. We met at a coffee shop. I laid it all out. The journals, the video, the letters, the court filings. She didn't say much until the end. Then she looked up and said, "This isn't just a story. This is the story." She ran it 2 weeks later. Front page of the Sunday paper. The forgotten grandson, Lakeland man cared for grandmother alone, left out of will, now fights to prove truth. There was a photo of me and Grandma sitting in the garden from 2 summers ago. She was holding my hand. Smiling. The article quoted the hospice nurse, quoted from the letters, and even ran a screenshot of the video, blurred slightly. They tried to reach Denise and Heather for comment. They refused. That was when everything cracked open. People came out of the woodwork. A neighbor across the street messaged me and said she'd seen Denise take a stack of papers out of Grandma's mailbox 3 months before she died. I didn't think much of it then, but now, a church member told me she heard Heather joking about selling the house fast and getting out of this dump town. A former co-worker of Denise's messaged Sharon directly, said Denise had tried to get legal advice at work about cutting out a manipulative nephew. Marcus filed new motions. Claimed fraud, undue influence, and improper execution of the will. And now the court was listening. But Denise wasn't done. 3 days before our first court date, my storage unit was broken into. They smashed the lock and rifled through everything. Took my laptop, an old TV, some boxes. But the weirdest part? The only boxes missing were the ones labeled documents. They didn't take my tools. Or clothes. Or anything of value. They took the evidence. Or so they thought. What they didn't know was that everything important was already scanned, backed up, and in Marcus's hands. The break-in proved something else too. They were scared. And they should be. Because in 3 days, we were going to court. And I had one more witness they weren't expecting. Court day came fast. It was hot. Humid. The kind of Florida heat that makes your shirt stick to your back before you even step out of the car. I sat outside the courthouse in my truck for 20 minutes before going in. Not because I was scared, because I was angry. And I needed to stay calm. Inside, the courtroom was cold. Denise sat across from me, dressed like she was auditioning for a church choir, pearl necklace, lace top, fake sadness. Heather was chewing gum, scrolling her phone like she couldn't be bothered. They didn't even glance at me. Marcus sat beside me. Calm. Collected. Then he leaned over and said, "It's time." The judge walked in. Female, older, sharp eyes. The type who could smell lies before they hit the air. Marcus opened with a simple statement. "Your Honor, this is a case of elder fraud. Our client, Luke Fairchild, was the sole caregiver for his grandmother, Margaret Fairchild, during the final 5 years of her life. Despite promises and video evidence that she wished to leave her home to him, he was written out of the will shortly before her death, under suspicious circumstances. He laid out everything. The medical records. The journal entries. The video. The notarized letter from the hospice nurse. The signed checks where I paid out of pocket for Grandma's prescriptions. The judge watched everything carefully. No emotion. Just notes. Then Marcus called the surprise witness. "Your Honor, we'd like to call Mrs. Dana Russo to the stand." Dana Russo was the notary who had signed the final version of the will. She walked in slowly, clearly nervous. She took the stand, raised her hand, swore in. Marcus asked her one question. "Mrs. Russo, did you witness Margaret Fairchild signing this will on the date listed?" Dana hesitated. Then she said, "No. I didn't." "You could have heard a pin drop." "I was asked to stamp it as a favor," she said. "Denise told me her mother had already signed it. I never saw the woman. I didn't think it was a big deal." The judge's pen stopped moving. Heather looked like someone had slapped her. Denise turned sheet white. Marcus kept going. "Did you know that notarizing a document without witnessing it can be considered fraud?" Dana swallowed. "I didn't realize how serious it was." After that, it spiraled fast. Marcus submitted a motion to void the will based on fraudulent execution. Denise's lawyer panicked. Asked for recess. Judge denied it. Then we dropped the hammer, a second video. It was from Grandma's final week. She was weaker, but her voice was clear. "If they try to take this house from Luke, don't let them. It's his. I told them. They don't listen." But he was the only one who stayed. The judge leaned back in her chair and just stared at Denise. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" she asked. Denise stood up, trembling. "My mother wasn't in her right mind. She said all kinds of things." Heather chimed in, "This guy's obsessed with her money. He's been planning this for years." Marcus stood and calmly handed the judge Grandma's handwritten letter. "The one I found in the box. Signed and dated, a year before she died. To whom it may concern, I wish for Luke to have the house. He is my caregiver and my heart. I do not trust Denise or Heather with my things." That was it. The judge ruled on the spot. The will was voided. A new executor, neutral party, was appointed. A court-reviewed accounting of the estate would take place. And the house? Returned to me. The judge added, "This court recognizes Luke Fairchild as the rightful occupant and beneficiary of the property. Furthermore, given the evidence of fraud and unethical behavior, the estate may pursue civil penalties against Denise Whitlow and Heather Whitlow." Denise gasped. Heather just whispered, "Oh my God." Outside the courthouse, Denise tried to talk to me. She had tears in her eyes. "This wasn't how I wanted it to go," she said. "You know how Mom was. She wasn't well." I looked her dead in the eye and said, "She was more clear than you ever were." Then I walked away. 2 weeks later, I moved back into the house. It was quiet. Still smelled like lavender. I sat on the porch that first night and just listened to the wind. That same day, Denise got a formal notice from the state. She was under investigation for probate fraud. Heather lost her job at the real estate firm. Apparently, ethics matters when you steal a dead woman's home. They tried to sell off Grandma's jewelry before the court order. But one of Heather's Instagram followers saw the pearls and tipped off the estate lawyer. They were seized. The final twist. The judge ordered a public notice in the Lakeland Ledger to correct the funeral record. A reprint obituary. With one addition. Margaret Fairchild is survived by her loving grandson, Luke Fairchild, who cared for her during her final years. She was never alone, thanks to him. Sometimes I still get angry. Not about the house. Or the money. But how close they came to erasing me. To making everything I did disappear. But they failed. Because I had proof. Because I didn't give up. And because I learned the hardest truth of all, sometimes family isn't about blood. It's about who stays when everyone else walks away. And in the end, the one who stayed, won.